Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, in the previous video I explained to you about our Islamic psychology model, where our Islamic psychology model in terms of your perception is being driven by your physical environment. That means both all aspects of physical environment in terms of your nutrition, your place, your health, your situational condition, everything that is physical that is in the dunya is there. Then you are influenced by your internal social environment and intersocial environment. And Allah has endowed you with inner speech. That means this is our human being, our total past learning history, TPLH. Our TPLH is influenced by these three: physical environment, social environment, inner speech, which affects our perception then affects us. And the outcome will be whether positive or negative, which I explained very thoroughly in a previous video. But how are we going to understand in terms of this whole idea of the S.E.M.P play here? Because this model, insofar as this model from, if you just remove the spiritual, emotional, mental self, this model itself is a psychology model in terms of development of perception in human beings, because we have inner speech. For animal, they only have physical environment and the animal social environment. Then it gives the perception of the animal, whether it is especially tribal animals, like for example like apes or monkeys or dolphins. They have this too, but they don't have inner speech. All right. So how are we going to then understand a higher level how our behavior is affected by our internal representation and our internal S.E.M.P flow? Okay, I'm going to give you some idea. All right, for this outcome to be positive or negative, there will be the behavior. So assuming this is a person, all right, this is the person here. I'm just putting the head only. You can take the whole body. In the other drawing, we have the head and the body, but this head, this person has all the internal representation of the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical self. From the Islamic psychology S.E.M.P model flow, I'm not talking from the secular psychology model flow, because our flow is different. Our flow is basically, we have within us, all right, within all of our filtering in terms of our spiritual, emotional, and mental filtering, we have also our internal representation and have the state of self. All right? And what are those affecting us in terms of our behavior and influences that are affecting us in a circle? All right? So first we must take that there are issues in which every day we have action episodes and events that is happening, coming from our eye, coming from our visual, auditory, kinesthetic, coming from our S.E.M.P. So even though we put this S.E.M.P here, but the imprint that we get comes from all realms. That means we have the realms of the physical, the realms of the mental, emotional, and spiritual. So this realm also is actually affecting us externally. So we are a creature of internal perception and external perception. This external perception comes into us in terms of episode, events, or to a certain extent behavior. All right, but there is behavior here. The main driver of behavior is here. So if I just remove this word here and I just leave it there, we have action, episodes, events. These episodes or events will affect our spiritual, emotional, and mental self. So we have this S.E.M.P filtering that is happening us all the time. We filter first our values. What are our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical values? For example, in Islam, we have our values. We have our values in terms of believing in Allah. La ilaha illallah. So la ilaha illallah is a very fundamental value, believing in God. So that is the first value. We have the belief system. All right, so values in terms of the moral values of doing good, helping others to be good, making the world good, believing in Allah. And then we have to make decisions. Based on the values and belief, we make decisions. And how do we make decisions? We use language. Allah has created us. When Allah created Adam, Adam was given this knowledge of all things. How does Adam express the knowledge of all things? Symbolic language. So we have, because of symbolic language, we have free will. Okay, so this free will then affects our internal representation in terms of our spiritual, emotional, mental. So there are many states in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, in terms of our taste, in terms of our smell, olfactory. So we have these senses. But these senses is not only the 5 senses. We have the 6 senses, the spiritual senses in terms of intuition. All right. So we have here the internal representation at the spiritual level. For example, if we want to put this here, intuition, spiritual experience, mystical experience, and so on. So these are the values that affects the state of the self. Right? This affect the state of the self, the internal representation and the filtering that occurs within us affects our behavior. So this whole circuit of what is happening to us in terms of Islamic psychology S.E.M.P model flow is quite simple. You can understand that from the previous video that I've explained to you, if there's an episode that's happening to you in this world, the episode, that event that happened to you in this world, it comes internally or externally. So externally, it comes from the realm of the spiritual, emotional, mental, or physical. It comes from the realm of the social, intrasocial, as mentioned in the previous model. This affects us totally. And we filter our belief and value system, we filter. So for example, a person who is a strongly practicing Muslim, he has a very strong sense of belief in Allah, of tawakkul ala Allah. So he went through a very bad state of, for example, a severe loss in terms of maybe a refugee where his whole family were bombed out and only he survived. How does he take that situation? Because he has this whole belief and value system of tawakkul ala Allah. He doesn't go mad. He goes through a very severe sadness. He maybe even go to depression, but he can recover because he knows finally this dunya is just a temporary thing. So this will then drive his behavior. So his behavior is not going to become revengeful, not to become hurtful, not to become mad, not to become depressed, not to become what we see in the modern world, where a lot of people, the behavior, even for small things, they kill themselves. So more and more of the young people of the world today, they do not have the values or the beliefs in terms of the higher values and beliefs. So they only have lower values and belief. But lower values and belief are just on the physical, peripheral only. All right? They can still use language because symbolic language we all can make, decisions we all can make, but their decision is not based on the higher values again. So this whole idea of filtering ourselves at a higher value or lower value will affect our behavior, whether we are agnostic, atheistic, or believers. All right? So there is a strong advantage for you to become a believer. I'm not saying, I'm telling you must be a Muslim. There's a strong advantage for your well-being in this dunya that you have these values of spirituality, of Allah, understanding Allah, because that will become an anchor. And I'll explain to you what the nature of anchor and so on. For example, what is our anchor, our spiritual anchor, our emotional anchor, our mental anchor. What is the modeling that we can use in terms of how we are going to affect our life, because we model our values and belief, our decision and languages based on what we are in. For example, we are in a modern society, we are not given any values. For example, a child, his name may be Ahmad, wonderful name, but he was brought up in a very secular environment. Say he's brought up in a Western country. He was not given any ideas of Islam. He goes through the school system and so on. He was not given any value system. So for him, the value system is nothing spiritual. It's just emotional, mental, and physical. The E, M, and P, but the S is disappearing. So because of that, his decision is based on his environment. All right, his language, the tone of his language is also based on the environment. So he will then grow up to become, because of the influence of the friends, the society, the schools, and so on, he become an agnostic, an atheistic, valueless Muslim. So if his name is Muhammad, or Ahmad, but he has no values. Once he has his values is not anchored to Islam or Iman or Ihsan, then his behavior is a typical valueless person. That means they will have drugs, they have free sex, they have video games, they have free for all, they have cults, they have all kind of things, because to fill the emptiness they go into cultism and football, even games now, even are being used as a diversion. All right, extreme music, heavy rock, metal, satanic music, and so on, because they have no anchor. So what is important is how we are going to develop our internal representation, because our internal representation must be driven by our spiritual, emotional, mental. That means all that we see in terms of our VAK, that means visual, auditory, kinesthetic, our 5 senses in terms of smell, taste, and touch, must also bring up at a higher level of intuition, mystical experience, all right, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the experiential part of Islam that is unfortunately not being taught. We are being taught about the doing salah, but what is the internal representation of the state of the self in salah? All right, of our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of our understanding of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the level that our iman is the iman that is progressing towards iman ainul yaqin. Even though we have not reached iman ainul yaqin, we are still wavering around, all right, or at nafsul lawamah, not at nafsul mutmainnah. We are still in the state of progression. So our behavior is a progressive behavior based on the influences that we get. So what is important is to have this positive behavior, we must have this S.E.M.P model flow to explain to younger people that this is how the world works, and how this S.E.M.P filtering takes place, and how your behavior, whether it is positive or negative, whether it is Islamic or not, in that sense, and how our state of the self, we can state that we are in the state of peace and tranquility. As Allah tells us in the Quran, we are progressing to the state, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutmainnah irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah fatulil fil ibad wadkhulil jannat. Allah is offering this state of peace and tranquility. Are we achieving that, or are we behaving because our behavior we go to the negative, as mentioned in the previous chart? The outcome of existence, because of the negativity that we take, we are regressing or going downwards towards all the sadness, the cult, the emptiness, the feeling of uselessness in this dunya, and that will bring to a lot of pain and suffering, which you should not go through. But if we want to have an outcome of life that is good, positive, wonderful, always having this idea, for example, like I give you my anchor, love, peace, care, fair, share. This is my anchor. Every now and then I do something, say love, peace, care, fair, share. So you try to anchor with positive values. What is this? Love, peace, care, fair, share. So then you try to, within your anchor of the self, you say, Alhamdulillah, the highest is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love of the Prophet, love of your family, love of yourself, and so on. Love, peace. So Islam is peace. So we talk about creating peace, developing peace, being a peacemaker. Love, peace, care. We must care for ourselves, our family, our environment. Share. We must share whatever that we have. Love, peace, care, fair. Must be fair, and then share. So if we can imbue with just these little values, we are progressing towards this wonderful, positive Islamic psychology. So I'm giving you the two models. First is a psychological model, and the other model is the how the flow, in terms of the flow of action, events, episodes, how it affects your spiritual, emotional level, external imprint, the internal imprint, the filtering, the values that you get, the internal representation of the self, the state of the self, the behavior, and the influences. And if you can link all this together, inshallah you can write a book even. I'm just giving you an overview of this flow, which I hope gives you a better grasp of what we are talking in terms of Islamic psychology model. We are not tinkering around with some mambo jumbo, but these are real integration in terms of how we want to explain Islamic psychology to young people. So if you can explain to them, say, oh wow, this can be something that I can learn about and I can practice. To have modeling, to have anchors, and to have the ability to achieve, inshallah, the greatest of success in this world and the hereafter. Always remembering Allah created us to be His sincere servant and His Khalifa on this earth. Always remembering that we are striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, and making the world good, inshallah.